Let me hear from the audience. Gentleman in the navy shirt in the middle here. Yes.
Independent. Just before I came here, my wife had voted to stay in UK, and I voted independent. But she said that if the Brexit and the independent votes, the referendums were the other way round, she would have voted to stay in, because Scotland got taken out of European Union, we didn't want it. We wanted to stay in there, but we were dragged out by the UK government.
Of course, during the referendum campaign itself, one of the key arguments of Jackie and her colleagues, if you vote yes, you'll jeopardise Scotland's position in Europe. You'll be dragged out of Europe. If you vote yes, we voted no, and what happened, Jackie? We got dragged out of the European Union.
But I have to say, that was a choice that the Tories made.
This is what I'm talking about when I say that Scottish politics is just fucking theatre, pardon my French. I do apologise for the lack of quality in terms of, instead of this being a screen recorder, I'm just using my phone. But it's just, every time I end up hearing this revisionist history, I feel compelled to say something about it. And every time I feel compelled to say something about it, I always inevitably feel compelled, there's a compulsion to start getting all of the old clips and whatnot and compiling them into yet another updated video on the same subject matter. But I'm not going to do that there. I'm just going to simply say a few things, and I'm going to upload this wee thing to YouTube as well. And if anybody wants the clips and whatnot that I'm referring to, I can quite easily provide them to you. But just to put this in the most simplest of terms, this narrative that Scotland voted to remain in the UK in 2014 because we were promised it was the only way to stay in the EU, or to quote Fatboy here, that it would have jeopardised our EU membership had we left the EU, had we left the UK in 2014. Like, this is just absolute nonsense. I mean, I don't understand why it gets a thunderous applause, as if people really do have the shortest of memories. The reality of the matter is that during for the most part, the vast majority of the debate on the independence question in 2013 going into 2014, the SNP were very militant in their belief, or their claim even, that Scotland would inherit the UK's EU membership in the event of voting to leave the UK. What I mean by that is that in the event of leaving the UK, or voting to leave the UK, we would immediately be in the EU, because we wouldn't have left the EU. We would have inherited the UK's membership. Towards the end of the campaign and the run-up to the referendum itself, the head of the EU at the time, the person that was there before Juncker, came out and said that Scotland would have to leave the EU, leave the EU and then try to rejoin at a later date. So the idea of leaving the UK and inheriting their membership was just baseless claims. That didn't stop, of course, Nicola Sturgeon, who I've got videos of from 2013 and whatnot, bragging to no end about how she's a lawyer and she knows her stuff, and that Scotland would inherit the UK's EU membership in the event of voting to leave the UK. Okay? So there's that to take into consideration. And on top of that, it was also very well known that in the event of David Cameron being re-elected, then there would be a constitutional referendum on the question of EU membership for the UK. There was a growing EU scepticism emerging in the UK. So much so that Nicola Sturgeon and whatnot, they themselves actually referred to it on many occasions. There's a video, again on my channel, from 2013 of Nicola Sturgeon actually coming out and saying that the biggest threat to Scotland's place in the EU doesn't come from independence. It actually comes from remaining in the UK due to the growing EU scepticism. Okay? And thirdly, let me just say that if the UK referendum in 2014 was really about the EU, then explain to me why the fuck any single SNP, MP and or MSP or activist and whatnot, why were any of them campaigning to leave the UK in the first place? It's It goes without saying that leaving the UK would have meant leaving the EU, right? That's stating the obvious. That the way that these people are trying to present this narrative, and it goes unchallenged, they're trying to present a narrative that we only voted to remain in 2014 because of the EU. We were promised the only way to stay in the EU, despite the fact there was a growing EU scepticism, despite the fact we would have had to have left had we got independence. So it just calls into question what they were really campaigning for in 2014. And this is what I was referring to in relation to absolute theatre, because that's what she should have said in response to that. But you didn't get that, did you? No, all you got was, oh, that wasn't us, that was the Tories. Good one. Good one.